And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono.
And I am the back-to-back champ in the finals again. Here I am. Let's get this thing going. It's championship week, baby.
Let's get into it. All right, let's talk about this Thursday matchup here. This is the first game of the week, week 17, and we've got the Jets, your Jets, Chris, versus the Cleveland Browns, a team that is actually looking better, in my opinion, offensively than they have all season, with a armchair quarterback in terms of Joe Flacco literally coming off the couch and into existence again in the NFL. What are your thoughts on this game, and who are some of the key players that you'd like and some of the key players you'd rather stick away from and pick a better matchup?
Yeah, so this is going to be, start of the championship week here, so let's get pumped up. To those of you who made it this far, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
Way to
Congrats.
do it. Way to get in there. Hope we were able to help you out a little bit along
Hey, it's not
the
over
way.
yet. You got to win it.
Yeah, you got to win it. If you ain't first, you're last, right?
That's not true because most people get payout at second place.
Yeah. Well, if you ain't first, you're last. Put some respect on it. This is going to be a good matchup. There's some players here that this is so different than years past with Jets Browns, where these two teams stunk and you really didn't want a piece of it. And then Deshaun Watson goes down, Dorian Thompson-Robinson takes over, and we think, all right, the season's over for the Browns, but no. Joe Flacco's come in and he's averaged 320 yards a game, averaged 2 touchdowns. However, he has averaged 1.5 interceptions per game that he's played.
True. And the fun thing about him right now is he's actually leading in yardage for quarterbacks in the NFL over the past 4 games.
Yeah, they said that if they stretch out his stats, if he would have played the entire season continuing on this trajectory, he would have broken the single season passing record. There's that. But let's start this segment by talking about these defenses, because I think that's going to lead into what we think is going to happen on the offensive side of the football, right? And that's the players that we like in this game. So both these defenses come into this as top 10 defenses. And in terms of fantasy, these two defenses have been, in my championship matchup that I'm going against, I have the Browns defense. I'm going against the first place team who has the Jets defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are two heavyweight defensive teams that can pressure the quarterback, that can limit yardage, and create turnovers. So let's start with the Browns. All right. So they have the easiest matchup, I think, of the two. They're going against a Jets offense, which has been fairly anemic. Last week they had a great game. They scored 17 points in the first quarter, and then they just dudded the rest of the way. They ended up with the win, but they let Washington come back on them. And so this defense has given up points and has given up yards to good offenses. This is a good offense. You have Amari Cooper, you have David Njoku, but with the Browns defense, I think they're going against guys that other than Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. Name another player that's fantasy relevant on that team right now.
No, we've talked about in the past that there really isn't. And we like Tyler Conklin as a streamer here and there, but in terms of relevance, that's not the case. You're not starting Tyler Conklin in your championship game here. And let's jump in, talk about these defenses before we start talking about a couple of the offensive players. But you're talking about Cleveland defense. They're number 1 in least amount of yards per game. They are number, I think, 12 in rushing yards per game. So they've given up about 100 rushing yards per game. They haven't been as solid as they were at the beginning of the season there. So that Breece Hall is an option here for the Jets that I do like. And you just mentioned his name. In terms of passing yards per game, though, Cleveland is number 1 and Jets are number 2. These teams, in terms of yardage, Jets are also number 3 in yards against, with both of them being under 300. And so to me, I think it's a Thursday night matchup. It's already two teams that continue to give low scoring affairs. except for Cleveland at times, because points per game, Cleveland is actually outside the top 15 at 20 points per game, and the Jets are at 21. So the teams have given up more. It's not like Baltimore with 16 points per game or Kansas City. Teams can score. However, it's tough when you put these two defenses together for teams to score on them, because the drives get stunted very quickly, very easily. And when you get somebody like Sauce Gardner, who's given up, 50 yards in the past 2 games to the receiving position, or however many games, I think it was 2 games I saw that stat being 50 yards or less, something like that. I mean, he's on fire. And when you get him, he doesn't shadow, but when it's matching him versus Amari Cooper, like, to me, you got to think about who they're going to pass to. So let's continue on the Jets. I like Breece Hall. I'm starting him after last week. If I'm in this game, knowing that Cleveland is not, they're outside the top 10 or barely outside the top 10 and giving up 100 rushing yards per game, Breece Hall is the strongest player on that offense right now.
Yeah, and I know we've kind of both been going back and being like, hey, this is a guy you're going to start. The only startable guy at times in this offense is Garrett Wilson, but this is a game where I think you sit him. In the championship game, he hasn't been the guy to get you there, right? He hasn't been, a top 10 receiver. So this is a game I think sit Garrett Wilson. And
I agree.
And outside of Breece Hall, go ahead and sit. I think Breece gives you a lot of upside with the receiving game. Breece gives you a lot of upside against where this defense is more vulnerable against. But they're going to get after Trevor Siemian. Remember, Zach Wilson's not playing in this game.
Yeah, he's still out.
He's out with a concussion.
So that may help, though, to be honest with you. That could help.
It could, but it's not like Trevor Siemian's come in and been Joe Flacco, right?
No, you're right, but he doesn't need to be. He just needs to be less Zach Wilson, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've knocked on Zach Wilson a lot. I've kind of stood up for him on this podcast and said at times he's looked good, and he's looked when he has time in that pocket. But the problem is, their offensive line has been beat up, and Dwayne Brown just got put on IR, season-ending IR.
Yeah.
The Jets' offensive line has been torn up all season, and they're not getting healthier; they're getting worse. So,
Correct.
Put Garrett Wilson, put Zadarius Smith. I'll trust them, that defense, any day over them. And then on the back end, if you're getting the pressure there's just nothing going to be available on the back end. And you have guys on the back end that can play. Like you said, their secondary has been really good. And so I don't trust Garrett Wilson in this game, and nor do I trust anyone else. This isn't sleeper time.
We're not talking about sleepers. We're not talking about streamers.
This is championship game. You make the decisions. I am more inclined to play DeMarcus Robinson than I am Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one too. I'd even look to somebody
over him.
Yeah, Brown.
Marquise Brown.
Noah Brown.
Yeah,
over him. Let's real quick, and we'll finish up on the one guy that we do like this week, and that if you have him in your lineup, feel comfortable starting him at least as your flex player, if not as your running back 2, and that's Breece Hall. But he was RB1 of the week last week, but that was against Washington, and he's done fairly well against good teams. I mean, Buffalo, bad rush defense. He was RB12 on the week, and this is standard scoring as usual here. Against the Giants, he was RB9. But he's done well against some bad teams too. Against some good rush defenses. He was RB5 on the week in week 6 against Philadelphia with 39. He only had 39 yards rushing, but he had the touchdown and he had 54 yards through the air in the passing game. So again against Houston, another sort of middle of the pack like Cleveland in terms of against the rush. He was RB6. He had 40 yards on 10 carries. But the dude ended up having 86 yards through the air and a touchdown. This is where he's going to be able to make his money, make his pay dirt, is out the backfield on some screen passes, moving around. And I think this is the way the Jets are going to be able to get up on the board is through Breece Hall. They're not going to be able to get away with giving the ball only 10 times. Like last week against Washington, he had 20 rushes. Yeah, great. He's had more in other games too, like Denver, 22. He had 16 against the Chargers. But when it comes to the air, he had 16 targets last game against Washington.
Yeah, and that's where, and like I said, he's good as a receiver out of the backfield, and when you get him in space, he's as elite as they come, right? He is a top 3, top 5 running back in terms of give this guy the ball in space and he can make the big play.
Yep.
He's shown it last year when he was healthy. He's shown it again this year outside, even in the first game where he had the 70-yard run against the Bills and it's ran out of steam. He has that explosive factor to him. And I do like him with Trevor Siemian because he's the dump down, which is, again, another reason why I don't like Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's not the check down guy anymore. Breece Hall is out of the backfield, and they're gonna have that more available to them this week when the wide receivers are getting shut down on the back end. And it's not the worst offense going against the worst defense. This is the best defense going against one of the best defenses going against one of the worst offenses.
Yeah.
So I'd be surprised if the Jets come out and win this game.
Yeah. Let's move over and talk real quick about the Browns here. I'll talk about one player I have the most confidence in this game, and it's probably David Njoku. That's probably the most confidence I have on this offense because if you look at how the Jets are, they're like number one against wide receivers and quarterbacks because they limit the amount of passing yardage. They limit the amount of passing touchdowns scored to the wide receiver position alone.
And the guys, let me interject really quick. The guys that have had big games against them have not come against Sauce Gardner. They've come against DJ Reed.
Correct.
And DJ Reed's still been good, but he's had the big plays against him. And they've been from the tight end position. Yep. And so, yeah, David Njoku is probably my only surefire start this
Correct.
guy.
And that's what I was saying pretty much. I mean, Njoku's been on fire in terms of his targets, and so has Amari Cooper in the past 3 games, but you can date back even before Flacco came in, Njoku was heavily targeted. And you can guarantee that's going to be the same case here, especially with the pressure that they're going to be able to put on him. Now, there's a caveat because Njoku's been great, but the linebackers for the Jets have been pretty good. I know they're banged up a little bit, but they're pretty good. But Njoku, we know he's a freak athlete. Let's be honest here. And so if he's going up against a nickel corner, if he's going up against Reed, if he's out wide, I like him there. And I think they're going to move
corner on a tight end, and not a tight end like David Njoku. You're gonna put a safety on him, or you're gonna put Quincy Williams or C.J. Mosley on them, which both those guys can cover, but they're
athletic enough.
We're talking about where these defenses are most susceptible, which is where we kind of have to pick this apart, right? Because these are 2 elite defenses that we're talking about. So where are they vulnerable against? We had when they played the Patriots earlier in the year, I called for the tight end position for having the big play, and that's exactly what happened. It wasn't the wide receivers. The one thing I will say, and this is keep your eye on it over the next morning, is Amari Cooper got banged up a little bit. He's questionable for this game. He's probably going to go. I don't love him as a play. Not against if Sauce is taking him 50% of the game, it's not going to be like he was last week. And the guys that have had big games against the Jets have not been Amari Cooper type receivers. They've been the freakishly fast receivers that have had big games against them. Mm-hmm. You had Jalen Waddle, you had Tyreek Hill. But outside of that, like there haven't been a ton of big plays from receivers all season. So I don't love him. There's 2 interesting things on this game on the Cleveland offense is mini revenge game for Joe Flacco and mini revenge game for Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't because of those 2, I don't love it enough, but if Amari Cooper doesn't go, Elijah Moore might be a sneaky start.
It could be. I mean, if you liken him to Khalil Shakir in a way, Shakir had 115, I think, and a touchdown against them. But, I mean, there are some other receivers, big receivers that had games against this team. I mean, I think Keenan Allen ended up having like 80-something yards, no touchdown, but had a decent enough game. And then 130 yards, I believe, for A.J. Brown, which is more of a Cooper-type receiver in terms of the 1A. But, of course, when you have a second receiver in Devonta Smith out there with you, they're moving those guys around, which is why I actually think Cooper may have a better game than we think they will, because I think they're going to move Njoku around this offensive line like you see they do with Ingram and Jacksonville, and get this guy out wide, pair him with some mismatches, get Cooper on Reed instead of being with Sauce, and moving him around and motioning around, I think is gonna be the one way they're going to get Flacco to be able to get him some open shots downfield. And we know the yards per attempt to Cooper are just through the roof. So you're getting the big play out of him. I will agree with you. I think it is a sneaky. We're not saying play him. We're not saying start him. But I wouldn't be surprised if Elijah Moore has a decent enough game here as being that secondary outlet or tertiary outlet from the other two guys, Njoku and Cooper.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it scares the hell. I have Cooper. It scares the hell out of me to play him. I think that there are better plays this week, just judging by what the Jets defense have done against wide receivers. They really haven't let up that many big games. And Amari Cooper's had a freakish game last week. I think it's going to come down a little bit to earth this week.
But here's my other question though is, what do you think about playing Flacco?
I don't like it.
Because the Jets are like decent enough and they're great enough on the defense and they're good against the quarterback. But I mean, he could still have a good game against Njoku. I mean, they have 19 interceptions on the season, the Jets. I haven't seen how many. I know Sauce Gardner doesn't have a ton, and I don't know how much Reed has. I know it's been from other players on this team. But I mean, the way Flacco's playing and the amount of yards he's throwing, and if that defense can keep that Browns offense on the field, look what happened with Washington. Jacoby Brissett comes in, and they're starting to move the ball a little bit more. And a tired defense is tough to even defend anybody at that point. So, I mean, to me, I could see Flacco actually going for like 250 and maybe 2 touchdowns, but also probably an interception at least.
Yeah, I mean, listen, is he gonna have a decent enough game? If you're a team that like lost Justin Herbert and you had Flacco and he's your only play, and you're deciding between him and let's say Gardner Minshew, well, actually
exact as your opponent this week. But that's what I'm saying is like who do you like over Joe Flacco? Because right now a lot of the experts out there are ranking him within the top 15. A lot of them within the top 13 or 12, being number 12 or 13 quarterback. It's hard to pick somebody better than him with all these backups playing. Like, I'm not playing Browning in a tough matchup. I don't even like Minshew against Vegas with what they just did to Mahomes in the past couple teams they played against.
There's a lot of tough matchups this week. That's the thing is, like, do you trust him enough against a good defense that's proven they've been a good defense? Now, this is what kind of alluding to what you said. The Jets have given up points. They don't shut teams down. They've let up 21 points a game. They look at the last 2 weeks where they've let up a ton of points, and they let Washington get back in that game.
Yeah.
So
it could happen again. I mean, just as easily here. I mean, I don't suspect this being a high-scoring affair, but you never know.
Look, the big plays didn't happen from the receiver position. So I actually like Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford in this matchup as flex plays.
I like Ford more because of his passing game usage.
For sure. But
because I feel like this team has more passing attempts than rushing attempts with Flacco under the helm.
I have just a sneaky suspicion that this is going to be one of those Browns game where the defense shows up and they get after the quarterback and they create a lot of short fields for themselves. So the running backs I think that they're going to get up in this game and they're going to hold that lead in the game, unlike the Jets. And when teams do that, A, that's kind of why I'm downgrading the wide receiver position. But B, it's why I like the running back position there, is because you're going against guys that, if you're only going 20 or 30 yards to go into the end zone or go kick a field goal. Hopefully they can kick field goals this week. But, this was a prime matchup for my kicker. But, he got hurt last week and nearly caused me a heart attack because of a very, very close call in the semifinals for me. Guys, I won by 8 yards. 8 yards.
Literally, he did. Let's talk about those running backs real quick before we recap everything and close out this episode. Here's the thing. Last week against Houston, Jerome Ford had the lion's share. He had 15 carries, didn't do a ton with it, only 25 yards, but had the touchdown. 2 targets and a catch for -2. They were downfield passing. Prior to that, though, he was seeing on average about 5 targets per game coming into that too as well with Flacco, and only about 10 rushes per game. And Kareem Hunt was on the other end, was about 7 to 9 rushes per game and about 2 targets per game as well. So Ford's got the majority of it, but it's still such a 1A, 1B scenario that I just don't love flat out starting one. Their flex plays to me with the upside in either one of them of scoring a touchdown. They don't have standalone value not getting in the end zone. That's what scares me about that team.
Listen, chances are you're in the championship, you don't have either one of these guys. And you have other running backs that you're going to play over them. So
Correct.
They're a flex play at best. They're not going to start over, your number one running backs. They're not starting over McCaffrey. They're not starting, even though Kamara had a bad week, they're not starting over Kamara.
I mean, you're not starting over Chuba Hubbard or people like that. Or even Singletary, who's playing really well right now. You're not starting him over those guys. But to me, I do agree that there is going to be opportunities for these guys to get in the end zone, and he may even be by air with Jerome Ford out the backfield at times inside that red zone, inside that 20-yard line for Flacco, which is why Flacco's not a flat-out start to me, but I understand with the amount of QB injuries in there, he is one of the better options of what you've got from that waiver wire that you may have picked up and got you to the championship. And like I've said, if he's gotten you to the championship the way he's playing right now, I'm okay if he throws 2 picks and 2 touchdowns and for 250, 300 yards, because it may be the best guy, better than the guys that are on the waiver wire for you to go pick up right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like the guys that are available for you to pick up are, the backups, essentially.
Yeah, do you want to take a chance on Aiden O'Connell against Indy, who he may have a better opportunity? Or Nick Mullins? These guys, like, do you want to take a chance on one of these guys? They're not sure shots, or at least go for a guy like Flacco, who, yeah, he's been throwing interceptions, but the yardage is there. The usage is there. The downfield threat is there. And this is a team that wants to continue to win and put their stamp on this AFC. So
yeah. I mean, they're trying to win the division. I mean, they're not winning the division, but they're trying to get in the playoffs and have I mean, they could. They're not out of it yet. I don't think Baltimore's clinched number one seed.
I think they locked it in with the win because they have 12.
Number one seed.
I think they locked in the number one.
They beat the Browns. Yeah, they have the strength. They did.
I think they locked it in. But let's recap this here before we shut down this episode. So we're saying we like these two defenses. If you got them here, they're the team that got you the championship. They're both teams that, they can give up some points here and there, but they get the takeaways, they get to the quarterback, and they keep some of the best players at bay on these teams. Fire up the Jets, fire up the Browns. In terms of the Browns offense that we like, Joe Flacco is a cautionary start, but we get it if he's the guy that you're nodding your head to, because it just may make sense with all the injuries at quarterback. And now Russell Wilson, a guy who I would have said would have been a great opportunity to start this week, is benched and likely to be cut in March. And then in terms of the running backs for the Browns, we like the opportunity for them. They are flex plays at best. Again, you're not starting these guys unless like you are injuries, like someone like you're unsure about Josh Jacobs, or you had Ramondre Stevenson and now he's on the IR. We get throwing a guy like this in your flex. In terms of Amari Cooper, he's a sit for us. But again, we like to say start your studs to a certain extent. This is a tough team to throw on, and it's a tough defense for the wide receiver position, especially against Sauce. But if he gets some opportunities up against DJ Reed, they're going to take shots. And he catches a couple of those balls, and all of a sudden he's got 80 in a touchdown type game. It's a possibility there. So he's not a flat-out sit for me. I know if you have better opponents and better matchups like Chris does and some other people may with their lineups, then it may be something that you're willing to take a sit on here and just eat the points and understand if he has a decent game, he has a decent game. On the Jets side of the ball, Breece Hall is our only start here. He's the only guy that if you've got him in your lineup, you should have him in your lineup. Like we said, the Browns still give up 20 points per game. They give up 100 yards in the rushing game per game this season so far. We like them here. So move forward with Breece Hall. Besides that, Garrett Wilson is a sit for us here. He's not the reason you got to the championship. He's not the reason you're going to win the championship. So feel comfortable playing somebody else. Like we said, there's Noah Brown.
There's a ton of other.
There's a ton of other guys that are out there that are going to give you an opportunity to get more points. So if you have any questions on your starting lineup in championship, feel free, leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification button so you get all of our shorts that we're going to be releasing. We're going to be talking about all the offenses that we like this week and maybe some offenses we don't like this week. And don't forget, Saturday morning, we will be lighting you up with your Cup of Joe show, your Week 17 playoff championship prep episode where we break down every single game this weekend leading up to the primetime games.
Go get yourselves one of these. It starts tomorrow.
Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go.
Do it.
As always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.